And that is, in fact, what Prince 2 is about. Prince 2, the acronym is Projects in Controlled Environment. Projects in Controlled Environment. And the two behind is just the second version of Prince. So, and it's got the name has just stuck. Prince 2 is mainly used in the UK as a project management methodology for managing most waterfall projects. So it's pretty big here in the UK. It's kind of similar to PMP. PMP goes into a bit more detail, but PMP is more for like the Americans, North American market. So we'll go straight into the lecture. So, like I was saying, Prince 2 is an acronym, Sprint Project in Controlled Environment, and it's a process based method for effective project management. So, if you ask me what is a process is basically has a number of inputs and what you would do with those inputs, and then has a number of outputs. And that's effectively what a process is. So or a series of actions or steps, taken in order to achieve a particular end. And Prince 2 here is that framework that we are saying, if you have a project to manage and you take your project through this, the chances are you would come out with a successful project at the end. So, Prince 2 is also flexible and guides you through the essentials for running a successful project, regardless of the scale, regardless of the size. One of the principles in the Prince 2 that we'll talk about is scaling Prince 2 to meet the need of the project. So, as project management professionals, this is one framework that you can have, at the back of your belt at any time you're thinking of managing projects. If you can just anything, if you didn't take anything from this class, just write number 7 3 times. 7 principles, 7 themes, and 7 processes. And if you can incorporate that in your management of your projects, then chances are you'll be successful in it. So that's what Prince 2 it's about. So we'll go into it into a bit more detail. So the 7 principles, themes, and 7 processes of Prince 2. 7 principles, 7 themes, and 7 processes of Prince 2. So before we I think I'll just give you, a quick overview of all those 7 principles. So 7 themes and 7 processes. So the 7 principles is: one, continuous business justification, learning from experience, define roles and responsibilities, managed by stages, managed by exception, focus on the products, and then tailoring to suit the project environment. So those are the principles. What is a principle? If I post that question, what is a principle? If you can, we want to make this class a bit interactive. I know it's quite late in the evening now, but what's the principle? Anyone can raise their hand and talk. Anybody? Can you still hear me? Just making sure I'm not talking to myself. Anyone wants to say what a principle is? All right. If no one wants to talk, a principle is basically just like a guide um through which, if you follow this guide, then the chances are you would achieve the outcome you the guide is leading you towards. Yeah. Thank you, Jose. A rule. Yeah. So it's kind of like a guide, a principle And that's effectively what a principle is. As individuals or as project management professionals, one of the things I really want you to take with these 7 principles is, in my head, how am I implementing this in my project? Am I being guided by these rules effectively? So the 7 themes, the themes are the business case, the organization, quality, plans, risks, change, and the processes. And themes, as far as Prince 2 is concerned, are the themes a project manager on a daily basis in their project have to be managing, either on a daily basis or they have to be doing it periodically. You have to have a business case within the project. You have to have an organizational structure within the project. You have to be clear about your quality, managing that. There has to be documents that back all these themes. And so as a as a project manager, when you go into your project management space, one of the things you should be asking yourself, how am I guided by these principles? So it's more of like your thought pattern. And what have I put in place to ensure that whatever I'm doing, I'm being guided by these principles? The themes would see that they kind of linked closely to the principles, but what management documents do I have to ensure that I am looking at these themes every time in the project? Periodically, I'm reviewing it. And that's what the 7 themes are. And then the 7 processes is how am I actually doing what I am doing as a project manager, and how is everything tied up together? So we have starting up a project, initiating a project, directing a project, controlling a stage, managing project delivery, managing a stage boundary, and then closing a project. Those are the 7 processes we have within Print 2. And in this document, you can see the print the principles form like the base for Prince 2. The theme forms like the building block around, and then the processes is what holds everything together um um as one. So 777, if you don't remember anything, 7 principles, 7 themes, and 7 processes. So like I said, together, all these 7 things, these 21 things, form the framework for and the foundation for good project management practice. So if you can have all these 21 things within your management environment, then chances are, yeah, you would come out with a successful delivery of projects that you are managing. Thank you, Reverend James. A guiding rule or standard that helps individuals and or groups determine what is right or wrong. Great. Thank you for that contribution, sir. So the first principle we will talk about is continued business justification. Continued business justification. So a project must make good business sense. And this business sense in this case might be the why. So you have to ask yourself as a project manager, why are we doing this project? There has to be a why behind what the project is doing. So some of the four things I would say most of the time is, are we, for example, in a business environment, are we trying to increase revenue? Are we trying to reduce cost, for example? Are we trying to increase maybe customer satisfaction? Or are we trying to, reduce or increase employee satisfaction? Those are some justifications one must be thinking about. So as a project manager, you'll be thinking, okay, what exactly is the why behind this project? Some other things, the why could be it's mandatory. If you work in a regulatory organization, or if you work in a business that is heavily regulated, say for example in the financial services, or maybe even in healthcare, there might be some regulatory agencies that will introduce something new which will mandate that a project is created just because you need to satisfy that mandatory requirements now. And that becomes the business justification. Because if we don't do this, maybe the business will be shut down. So we have to initiate this project to deliver on the new, requirements that the regulatory organizations have instituted. So continued business justification, the project must make good business sense. It mustn't, and it mustn't necessarily be that some projects might cost money, but in the long term, it's maybe the company is seeking to achieve a new market, and it may seem that it might be losing money, but if the justification for that project is that we are going to get this new market share, then that becomes a project. The project makes good business justification. So the justification is regardless of if the business is necessarily losing money or gaining money. It is, why are we doing this project? And Prince 2 would suggest that once that justification is no longer valid, then the project should be closed. That would be the suggestion from Prince 2. Once the business justification is no longer valid, then the project should be closed. Second principle is learning from experience. Learning from experience. Many times, there is a saying that experience is the best teacher, right? You've heard that a lot. And one of the principles that Prince 2 suggests is that our project teams should always learn from previous projects. So if you're starting, a new project, one of the things as a Prince 2 professional is, or as a project manager with Prince 2 background, is that have we had this project running before? Have we, what can I learn from previous projects that have, or previous similar projects that I'm about to institute or initiate? But also, as a Prince 2 professional, you want to be making sure that you're also, any lessons you're learning within your project, that you're capturing it, because someone else might pick that project up or pick a similar project. And so all the lessons you've learned is already captured in a place ready for someone else to pick that. So as a Prince 2 professional, we have what we call the lessons learned log. We have it also here. So if you have access to my slides, you'll be able to see the lessons learned template. You can, in fact, you can click on it. It's just a Google sheet where you can, it's basically a list of what happened, what lessons did you learn, and what will you do differently next time. And as you go through the delivery of your project, you want to be capturing all these items. So that is learning from experience. So this is a tool for you to have as we go through the course. I think in my last lecture, welcome lecture, I told you there are a number of tools in the week that you are there for you. So this is the RAID log template. You can take a copy of this for your own use, personal use, or for running your project. Very, very good tool. So back to the presentation slides. The third principle of Prince 2 is defined roles and responsibility. I really like this picture because it's kind of ties in. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people here, and they're all trying to focus on one Formula One car. However, each of those 9 people have one thing that they're doing, a specific task that they're doing. So they have a role and they have what that role is responsible for. And so with Prince 2 and in successful project management, everyone in the project needs to be involved, and they need to know what they're doing and what everyone else is doing. And this also includes the people who need to make the decisions within the projects. Everyone needs to know if, for example, we need to decide on when we're running out of budget, who's the person who calls that shot? Or who's the person who's responsible for tracking how we're doing with spend? or who is the person responsible for, actually signing off on particular deliverables within the project. There has to be clear roles and responsibilities. So within Prince 2, we have eight roles, eight roles that are defined. And this is kind of in a hierarchical way, the way it's structured, with the project manager being in the center of it. The project manager is one role identified in Prince 2, and we've got then the project board, who are made up of three. So these are three roles, not necessarily three people. A role is an activity or something somebody plays. The senior user is the person who, whatever the project is delivering, would end up being signing off as the people, the individuals that would use the project. So, for example, a senior user for maybe an ATM machine would be the bank who the ATM machine is being delivered for. And then someone from the senior user would also be checking that it's meeting all the requirements that the project was meant to deliver. So that's where most times the acceptance of whatever the project is being delivered will be signed off by the senior user and say, okay, yes, what we agreed at the beginning, this is what we have achieved at the end. But it has to be someone senior, and the senior user is usually forms one of the key roles in the project board. Then the executive is a person, or the role, sorry, that sponsors the project. So the executive is the role that sponsors the project. The person is usually, or the role is usually budget related. They are the ones that finally have they hold the strings to the purse and provide the money to deliver, the project. They hold they hold the purse to the budget for the project. And then the senior supplier will be the person who's actually um from from the supplier perspective, the people who are delivering the work. So sometimes as a project manager, or most times as a project manager, what you are doing is coordinating a lot of resources. You're coordinating a lot of resources, the resources of time, the resources of money, the resources of people. You're coordinating quality, you're coordinating communication, you're coordinating, you're a major coordinator within the project environment. And there will be the senior supplier, someone who is responsible maybe for delivering some of the major deliverables within the project. So you need someone at that person, at that level, forming the project at the project board. Then you've got the project support is another role, a role that supports the project manager. You've got the project assurance. Um, the project assurance, most times, because the senior executive, they usually are busy individuals, they would delegate some of their responsibility to someone else to ensure that the project um, is being delivered according to what they're expecting, to according to their expectation. And from time to time, project assurance will create would assure the project, assure that the deliverables are, meeting the standards that they've set out. And then change authority is another role where project in Prince 2, we allow changes based on if things have become off specification, or there's a request for change, or it's an issue. Things are allowed to change, but there has to be a process through which we have to go through that change. Later on, I think in the course, we'll talk about change management within the project environment. But there will be a role, especially for very large projects or IT projects that require a number of changes, where there'll be a change authority, change board that would basically assess, make any impacts of those changes, and then ensure that the changes are authorized or put on hold in the project delivery lifecycle. And then finally, we've got team managers. Depending on the many teams that are running at the same time, you would have various team managers and then team members within that team. So this is the structure, this is the organization that Prince 2 suggests for every project team. There should be a senior user, a senior executive, a senior supplier, uh, a project manager, obviously, a project support if required, and then a team manager. The ones in project assurance and change authority basically would depend on the size and scale of the project, but as much as if it's needed, and this is where tailoring comes in, where that would be also required as a role within the project environment. But let me just also highlight here that within the project environment, these are roles. So it's possible that an individual will play multiple roles. So that's where we just need to clarify the difference. This is not suggesting that there has to be 8 people within the project environment. It's 8 roles. So one person can play a couple of roles at the same time, but some roles are like kind of, you might not necessarily be a senior user and a senior supplier, because it's like you marking your homework, and then the responsibilities would then come in to each of these roles. I hope that makes sense. Then the fourth principle is managed by stages. Managed by stages. So it's the principle that any task that you have, if you attack the task all at once, it will be very difficult to surmount that task. But if you break the task into manageable chunks and then you sort out one manageable chunk after the other, chances are just over a matter of time, the insurmountable task that you had before, you are able to surmount it because you've broken it down into smaller pieces. There is a funny saying that goes, "How do you eat an elephant?" or "How do you eat a cow?" And the answer is a piece at a time, or a chunk at a time. And so nobody here would be able to eat an elephant all at once, or a cow all at once. But if you did eat it chunk by chunk, piece by piece, it's just a matter of time. Many of us here will be able to finish a cow or an elephant um, over a time frame. So Prince 2, and this is where the processes start to come in later, managed by stages. We have to, like, if there's a big project, for example, we need to build a 20-story building. As a project manager, one of the things to start you would want to be thinking about is, okay, how can I break the building of this 20-story, you know, um, this 20-story facility into stages? A good stage might be, defining these are just 4 stages I've identified here: defining it, designing it, actually doing it, and then delivering it. So before you start building the building, which is in the doing it, you would have to have designed it. At the designing phase, probably nothing would have been, the site might not even have been determined. you know um at the defined stage, you might be, okay, what site should we build this 20-story building? What exactly are we trying to do? What is this 20-story build? Oh, okay, it's a hotel we're trying to get, right? Where in the city should this be located? Some high level aims and objectives. Then when you go into the design phase, you're now like actually designing some of the work, planning some of the objectives that will be delivered, some of the suppliers that you would need to engage with at the design phase, drawing up contracts. At this stage, no brick has been laid no foundation has been dug. You are now even, designing the entirety of the building, and then you're now then doing it. You're planning the events that actually would go into taking the building and raising it off the ground. And then you finally are delivering it. You're testing, making sure that, all the safety requirements are met. You're checking back with the initial sign-offs and the initial requirements that, okay, we met and we've delivered it. So this is just for random stages, but the key thing here is whatever project you're delivering, you want to be asking yourself, what stages can I break this down into? Manageable chunks, do the first one, move into the next one. And that is what the waterfall approach is all about. Then the fifth principle is managed by exception. So one of the things Prince 2 suggests is that when the work packages, when work has been divvied out to everyone, there is the belief that everything is going on as planned. And the manager or the project manager does not need to intervene unless there is an issue that needs the intervention of the project manager. And it's at that point that the project manager comes in to help. So if the project is running well, there is no intervention that is required. And each activity, has been given a tolerance that if there is a forecast that, oh, we would breach this tolerance that we've been given, it is at that point that the person responsible for that task needs to highlight to the project manager. And then that's where management comes by exception. So, for example, if the project budget is like £2 million and the person responsible for tracking the budget is now giving an extra maybe to 10%, that everything is fine and you can go over even by 10%. So that's about £2.2 million. The plan or the idea with managed by exception is that when you're starting to forecast that your spend is going to go over the £2.2 million, not at when you've gone over it, is when you're forecasting that you're going over that amount, maybe in the next 3 months or 5 months, we're going to go over this amount. That is when management needs to come in and you need to flag that up. But the idea or the assumption would be that if the project manager doesn't say anything, then we are going to deliver based on what we agreed on at £2 million, and nothing, the project would come as will be delivered as is meant to have been delivered. So management by exception, no intervention of the project manager is required unless there is a forecast to breach the tolerance that the project manager has been given. So the next principle is focus on products. Focus on the products. So this principle is basically saying, and this is a guide, remember principles are just guide, that everyone should know ahead of time what is expected of the project products and the outputs. And the outputs or the project requirements are the things that should determine the work that is delivered within the project, and not, we shouldn't just be working for working sake. So for example, the a project to like reduce costs, for example, in an organization, we implement that project and say, in the next 5 months, we want to reduce our operating cost by 10%. And that's a project our finance has been targeted with. And so that project, whatever work that happens around that project, should be focused towards delivering that outcome. And that is the product. At the end of the day, the product for that project would be a reduction of costs by 10% over the course of 5 months. So the work needs to be tailored around, or tailored is not the right word. The work needs to be focused. That's where this um magnifying glass is. It should be focused towards delivering the project, and that is where everyone's attention should go. And then finally, tailoring the environment. Prince 2 can be scaled to large projects, and it can be scaled to small projects. So the main thing here is that all these 7 things, 7 principles, and 7 processes that we're talking about, they need to be they need to they need to be pragmatic. You shouldn't follow Prince 2 dogmatically. So for example, one of the things, a project that is costing, you know, maybe, let's say, not even, let's say, a regulatory project that has to do with, I'm thinking of an example now, maybe a regulatory project that has to do with ensuring that all the data within your organization is stored securely, and you have servers to store it. You might need to write like an extensive business case to determine first which are the right servers to use, which have we gone through the RFP process, which is request for proposal. Have we tested the market to see what is out there before we then decide which servers to use, and all those things go into the business case. And that might be needed for a project that scale. But for a project like, you need to build a new canteen, maybe within your organization, the business case might just be that, for it might even be in an email. We have a budget of X amount of pounds. We need to build a canteen because staff are going miles to get food. And so this is the business justification. All in one email is going to take X amount of time, and we can be done by it can even be done internally. So the tailoring here of the business case is to ensure that we are not just writing a business case statement that might take, there's some business cases that might be 20 pages, or some might just be even an email. The key thing here is that you want to ensure that you're tailoring what you are doing to the environment, to the scale and the size of the project that you are delivering. So that is it. The 7 themes, the 7 principles. I'll just go through them again. And remember, these are guides. These are things you should be thinking of as a project manager. They should guide your thinking. They should guide your decisions as you go through. Is my business case still justified as I'm delivering this project? Is there a clear return on the investment I'm making, which was agreed at the start of the project? Am I learning from experience? The things I'm learning from the project, am I documenting it for someone else to learn from me in the future when I do, deliver the project? Or if I have to pick this project again, how would I do it differently? Define roles and responsibilities. We talked about 8 roles that are defined within project Prince 2. And there should be people who know what they are doing and know what other people too are doing. There shouldn't just be anyone not knowing what they are doing within the project environment. Then these are the roles: the senior user executive, the senior supplier, the project manager, project support, the team manager, and then the change authority or project assurance based on the size or scale of the project. Then we've got managed by stages. How do you eat an elephant one chunk at a time? How do you eat a cow one chunk at a time? Cut large tasks into manageable chunks and then deliver each phase and move through it. That's managed by stages. And then managed by exceptions. There is no need for any management intervention unless we're forecasting to break the tolerance which we've been given to work within. That is when management comes in. And then focus on product. The product, what is being delivered, needs to drive the work and not the other way around. The work shouldn't, you shouldn't just be, your work should be targeted towards the delivery of the product. And then finally, tailoring to the environment. Don't follow Prince 2 dogmatically. We need to do things that make sense to the environment we are working in, to the project that we're working in. If it's a large scale, maybe regulatory project, a lot more documentation might be required. If it's something in your home, you might not need as much documentation, but still following the Prince 2 process. So that is it. Then the seven themes, and these are, like I said, can be thought of as knowledge areas and how you're putting into practice some of the principles that were suggested. And like I said, every day or every time the project manager is managing a project, he or she has to be clear as to what documents am I using to underpin these 7 areas. So there has to be like some documentation or some backing for these 7 areas to ensure that, or not necessarily documentation, there has to be like 7 things I'm doing to ensure that these 7 themes are being considered and I've thought about it and I can actually show you proof that, yeah, business case, this is my business case. Organization, oh yeah, this is my organizational structure here. Quality, yeah, these are my requirements. These are my acceptance criteria. Oh, the plans, oh, here are my plans in an Excel sheet on a Microsoft project. Risks, oh, this is my risk log. Change, this is my change process. This is my change authority. Progress, oh, these are the reports I give every week, every month. There has to be something backing the 7 things as a project manager. And remember, the thing we're talking about, Prince 2, is that by considering these 7 themes, considering these 7 principles and the 7 processes, chances are you would lead to a successful project delivery. From the looks of things, I don't think we'll be able to go through to the 7 processes, but generally it's fine. We usually cover the 7 principles and the 7 themes and then leave it, and then we'll start the next class with the processes. So the 7 themes, business case. So if you see, the business case theme is kind of linked to the continuous business justification. And a business case basically captures, in a nutshell, the reasoning for initiating a project or a task. Here we also have a business case template that you can consider. This is a short business case that you can think of what the project, and these are the headings of what should be included in a business case. So you've got the project business case temple example. This is one that's been completed. Something as simple as this would form a business case. It mustn't be reels and reels of pages. So we've got what the project name is, who the project sponsor is or the executive, who the project manager is, the date the project was approved, the last time the business case was reviewed. Remember, Prince 2 talks about the continuous business justification. So after a while, the project manager needs to go back to the business case. Are we still justified to continue this project? And he says yes, or no, or she says no. And then, you start the management actions as to what to do next. Some other items you might want to have consider in a business case is, the contribution to the business strategy, how what you are doing aligns to the overall strategy of the organization that you are working or delivering the project for. Or if it's in a government circle, does the government in does the active government have like a strategy that they're working with that this project is aligned to? And then another thing we want to consider is what options have you considered? what options have you considered in the project? One of the things that is missing here is considering doing nothing. That is always a consideration to also have at the back of your mind as a project manager. Have you considered doing nothing? Um, okay, I'll come back to principle 6 later, Thomas. Let me just finish this. So, have you considered doing nothing? Because actually doing nothing if might be the best course of action to take. Um, instead of implementing a project. Then you want to consider the benefits as well. So, what are the outputs? What will I gain? This is the why. This is where the crux of the business case would be. Why am I doing this? And what will I achieve? Not necessarily the individual. What will the organization achieve by doing the project? And then the time scales. Here is just a brief. So this is an example of tailoring as well. Time scale can be as simple as initial analysis shows that the system will take 3 to 4 months to implement. So, but in another environment, maybe you might want, this might not be sufficient. You might want to have like a detailed project plan where you say, okay, in day month 1 we're going to do XYZ, month 2 we're going to do XYZ, in day 2 of month 3 we're going to do XYZ, and then that might be required for the kind of implementation you are trying to do. But in this case, just an overall implementation timeline was given. And then the cost, your business case has to have the cost, definitely the cost, how much it would cost you to deliver the project, and then the expected return on investments. We're not going to go into that much in-depth analysis of things like rates of ROIs, that's rate of return, or NPVs, and that's net present value, or payback period. These are different financial metrics used to determine how a project will return on its investment. But those are things that you can go ahead and continue to read on. But some business case would have what those items within their financial appraisal for the business, for the project being implemented. How are we going to get back the money, or what money are we going to get back, or what cost are we going to reduce over how many years, and things like that. You'll be able to determine that in the and include that in the business case. And then finally, the risks. You want to identify high level risks that you've considered when implementing the business case. So a risk, we have a different lecture to determine how to manage risks within the Princeton environment. So we'll touch upon that later in subsequent lectures. So that's a business case. The second theme is the organization. So you can see organization kind of links directly to define roles and responsibilities. So the organizational theme requires, project managers to ensure that basically there has to be like clear communication lines and how each people report to others. There has to be like defined roles and responsibilities, and a plan on how people interact with each other. Some places, some organization, you're not expected to speak to or even communicate to your manager's manager or someone 2 levels above you. Some other organizations is like a flat playing field. It all depends. Within the project environment, the project manager has to determine what is the organization and how do we interact within this project, who is doing what, and how the reporting lines are structured. Then quality. This is this principle, or sorry, this theme kind of aligns to the principle of focusing on the product, focusing on product. The product being delivered needs to be fit for purpose, and that's what quality is. Quality has to do with ensuring that whatever has been delivered by the project aligns to the requirements or is acceptable based on the requirements that were defined at the beginning. So I'll ask a question quickly. Let's have a quick interaction. If I had if I told or asked someone to buy me a watch and they go out and go and buy, and I asked for a Swatch watch, for example, and I told them and gave them 200,000 pounds to buy a Swatch watch. Okay, that's a lot of money for a watch. Say 100 pounds to buy a Swatch watch. But then they came back and I told them I want a plastic Swatch watch for 200 pounds. Go out, help me get this. But then they come back and give me, and they said, oh, they actually saw an Omega watch that is on sale. It was originally 1,000 pounds, but now is at 200 pounds. It's the same money you gave me, and I bought it. And this is a quality watch. It's obviously a better quality than what you told me. As far as Sprint 2 is concerned, that has failed in quality. That has failed in quality. We're running out of time, so I didn't want to open it up to discussion. But as far as Prince 2 is concerned, that has failed in quality. And why it has failed in quality is that it has not met the requirements for which was stated right from the beginning. So for example, I said a plastic Swatch watch. And it might mean that it could be that I could not maybe wear metallic watches, and the Omega watch that the person thinks is a more quality watch is buying for me is a bargain price. I might not be able to even use that just because maybe I react to metals, and that's why I defined the a plastic watch at the beginning. So quality here as a project manager is that you have to ensure what are the requirements for the project deliverables? What are the acceptance criteria? At the end of the day, I'm going to check this deliverable by this acceptance criteria. Have we met that? Yes. That is when we've met quality. And we're not saying things cannot change, but if they do change, it has to go through the change management process. So for example, the example I gave, if the person I told to get me a watch comes back and says, "Oh, we I found a better watch. It's on a deal. It's on a great discount. It's a metallic watch. Do you think I should buy it instead of the Swatch watch?" What will I do? I would impact assess it. Okay, it's metallic. I wouldn't be able to wear it anyways. Don't worry. Just stick to the original plan. And then we still stuck to the requirements. Or if I say, okay, actually it's a good deal, yeah, I think I can wear it. Let us now change the requirements. The requirements now changes to from a plastic watch to a metallic watch, so, and then when we come back to assign or to determine the acceptance criteria, the requirements would match the deliverables. So I've spent a lot of time on quality, but quality is not how good something is or how well something is. It's basically from a project management perspective, how the products match to what was originally determined in the requirements um, um, at the beginning of the project. And as a project manager, you have to have some documentation to ensure that this is what we said we're going to deliver at the beginning of the project. This is what we said that when we deliver it, when we measure XYZ, you'll be happy. And then when the end of the project comes, you then make those approvals, and that is quality. Then plans, as the plans, determine it. Plans, we have to have plans. Plans for our time scales are called, we have Gantt charts. You have to have plan for your cost. you have to have which plans for your cost are budgets, plans for your quality, that's like your requirements, documentations, and your acceptance criteria. You're planning for your quality, you're planning for your benefits, how you track that the products that you've delivered by the project are actually achieving the things that they said they would achieve. So as a project manager, you have to ensure that you're planning for your resources. For example, where you use Microsoft projects, okay, who is doing what? That is where the organizational theme comes in as well, where, okay, person A is doing work for 3 days in team B and then move to do work for 5 days in team C. As a project manager, someone said that you spend a big chunk of your time planning and communicating, and it's important that as a project manager, that is what you focus your time on: planning, communicating, and then ensuring that people are working and executing based on those plans. So risk is another huge theme. We have a dedicated session to manage on managing risks in Prince 2 in the Prince 2 environment. But the theme of risk is that you have to have a way to ensure that you are identifying the risks, you're assessing the risk, and you're controlling uncertain events during a project. And someone might ask me, what is a risk? A risk is any uncertain event that may that will impact the project either negatively or positively if it does happen. So negative risks are called threats and positive risks are called opportunities. So they have the potential, the propensity to impact the project negatively or positively. But the thing is that it is uncertain. No one knows if it will happen or not. So that is the two key things that determine a risk is the uncertainty of the event and the impact it has on the project. So for example, if an event is even certain but has no impact on the project, it's not necessary, it's not a risk. Um it's just an event that happens and we just need to be aware of it. But it's not a
Mac
risk
OS contains a built-in
to
screen reader called VoiceOver.
I'm sorry
If
about
you know
that.
how to use VoiceOver, press Command F5 now to turn it on and set up your Mac. If you would like to learn,
It's sorry about that. It's I was going on with risks. So yeah, a risk has two major components: the fact that it's uncertain, and then the fact that it has an impact on the project. So if a risk does not have an impact, sorry, if an event does not have an impact on the project, no matter how likely or unlikely it is, then it's not something you should be considering. And then if an
Mac OS
activity
contains a built-in
has
screen reader
an
called
impact
VoiceOver.
on the
If you
project,
know how
but
to use
then is
VoiceOver,
very
press Command
unlikely that it
F5 now to turn it
happens,
on and
or
set up your
it's
Mac.
it's it's
If you
you're
would like
sure
to
that it
learn
will
how to
never
use
happen,
VoiceOver to
then
set
the
up your Mac,
chances are you don't
press
need
the
to
Escape
consider
key.
it to as a risk. So those are the things. We'll go into risk in depth later on to expatiate on that. Then change is a sixth theme, and there are three major changes that Prince 2 identifies, which can be categorized broadly. A change is basically any event that has happened that is now impacting the project. So consider it to a risk. A risk is an event that is unlikely, that might happen or might not happen, but can impact the project. Um, uh, uh, in change management is how we deal with issues. Change management is about how we deal with issues within the project. And issues, sorry, unlike risks, are activities or items that have happened that are definitely impacting the project. And so what Prince 2 suggests is that we have to have a framework for which we manage changes. And there are three main issues: request for change, where the supplier or the customer within the customer supplier relationship is requesting that, okay, we change something. So, for example, this project of going to buy a wristwatch, the person I sent in this situation came back to request for a change. A problem or a concern is also a way is also an issue. So, for example, if they bought back the Omega wristwatch, which was metallic chain, but I cannot wear it, that becomes a problem. It's an issue. How do we change that? And then something that is off specification, for example, when you ask somebody or ask for an item to be delivered within the project and they've delivered it, but then it's not to the requirements, to the standard that you asked for, which is quality and a quality issue. These three things, three items here, uh, effectively you have to have a way of changing, you have to have a way of managing that change process through it. And there is another lecture, I believe, a second to the last lecture, or our last lecture, where we briefly touch about the change management process. So as a project manager, this is a theme. You have to ensure that, how am I managing change within the organization, within the project environment? Change is welcome, but it shouldn't just happen anyhow. There has to be a process guiding it. And then progress, which is the seventh theme, talks a lot about reporting. That's why I said reports. It talks a lot about reporting. Progress is about tracking how well, what you are doing, how you're going, how far you are within your project. So, this allows basically project managers to control and check where they are relative to the plan. So, for example, if you said by today, I should have covered 20% of my work, you need to be reporting against that. Have I actually reached 20%? Or am I below? Or am I above? Those things need to be checked regularly as a project manager. And one way of checking it is through reports. So there are a number of reports within Prince2, highlight reports, maybe a weekly report, exception reports. There are many reports that the outcome or the key thing that you're trying to achieve as a project manager is to ensure that you are where you are. And if you are not there, what are you doing as a project manager to ensure that you are either escalating things or you are um, managing the gap between where you are and where you ought to be? And so this, for some people, would say one of the most important themes. All themes are important, equally important, don't get me wrong, but by not tracking, we as project managers are not even aware that something that should be happening is not happening. So if, for example, a team needs to deliver maybe 10 boxes of a particular product every month for this project to be delivered within, a time frame of 2 years that we've given ourselves the project. It then means that if I'm not checking how well they are doing on a monthly basis, if there's no report saying, okay, this is how far we should have gone and this is how far we've done, there is no way a project manager will be able to know and determine and judge where they are in the journey. So the theme of progress is also equally important. So the seven themes and what they are trying to achieve is the business case. It's asking the question why. Why are we doing what we're doing? The organization is asking the question who is doing what. The quality is asking the question what are we doing and what is the marking scheme. How will I say it, as passed or failed? The plans is saying how much, when are we doing what we're doing, and how are we doing it? The risks is asking the question, what if this happens? What if that happens? How am I mitigating it? And then the change is, what's the impact of this thing that has currently happened? How can I ensure that there is the impact is absorbed within the project, or we actually eliminate it from impacting the project? And then the progress talks about, where are we now? Where are we going? And should we carry on? So I would end this lecture here. I wouldn't go into the processes because it take us quite a few minutes to go through the seven processes. But the seven processes effectively ties up everything together. You can see the stages here where we talked about chunking things into stages, and the processes is basically bringing people together who needs the project manager, the people who need to direct the projects, that is the project board, and the people who are delivering it, the team managers. So we'll go through that later. But just to round off, we've spoken about 14 themes now, 7 themes and 7 principles. Principles are guidelines through which you would think to guide you on the project. And the 7 themes are the things a project manager on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis needs to be running and ensuring that they have backups and backing evidence to their business case, their organization, quality, plans, risks, change, and progress. And they're doing something proactively to ensure that these things are being monitored and managed within the project. So someone spoke about quickly, let me just, the sixth principle. Thanks, darlingness, for the feedback. Tailored focus on product. So focus on products. Like I said, the product, what you've determined the product to be, the work should the product should determine the work that produces that product. And that is, like I said, this is kind of linked to quality. If, for example, you need to create a new pen that can draw a line of 0.001 millimeter thick, for example, and that's the product we're trying to achieve. The work might then mean that we need to go and get specialized equipment. We need to get some particular things to get that kind of level of quality we're trying to get to. As opposed to, it shouldn't be, if for example we're not data, if that output is not what we're going for, then we don't need to get that specialized equipment. We could get any other equipment to get the outcome that we're trying to achieve. So what we're saying here with focus on product is have the end in mind, the goal in mind. What are we trying to achieve? And that is what should determine the work. We shouldn't just be working for working's sake. So I hope that clarifies the person who asked. I think that was Thomas Taban. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, and it's been a fantastic 1 hour. Thank you. Apologies, I've been quite busy, but I've seen some notifications coming on the central chat, and I'll respond to that soon. Yeah, Jose, it's like having the view of the outcome. Yeah, correct. The lecture slides are available. They are on. So if you go to week 2, so if you go into week 2, you see the lecture slides there. So this is week 2. My portal might look slightly different from yours, but in week 2, you see week 1 and 2 lecture slides, and the lecture slides are there. There are some tools in there. You guys can take that and use that for yourself as well. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Have a good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're dialing in from.
Thank you. Have a good time.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right then. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
and
night.
good evening.
Bye.